Can you believe this? When people talk about airborne threats to American air power, the usual names come up fast. Russia's newest stealth jets, China's next-generation fighters, aircraft built to challenge the US in speed, stealth, and raw firepower. But behind closed doors, inside Pentagon briefing rooms, there's another jet that triggers a very different kind of concern. Not fear of losing a dogfight, not fear of being outgunned, but fear of losing control. That aircraft is Sweden's Gripen. On paper, this shouldn't make sense. Almost every defense expert agrees on one thing. The Gripen cannot beat the F-35 in a straight-up one-on-one air combat scenario. The F-35 is stealthier, it has more advanced sensors, it carries deeper integration with cutting-edge weapons. Even Sweden openly admits this. So why would the most powerful military bureaucracy on Earth care about a smaller, cheaper fighter jet from a country with a fraction of America's defense budget? Because this story isn't really about technology, it's about ideas. The Gripen represents a completely different way of thinking about air power, alliances, and military dependence. And that idea is far more dangerous to Washington than any missile or radar system. To understand why, you first need to understand what the Pentagon is not worried about. US planners are not lying awake at night wondering if a Gripen will suddenly dominate the skies over an American carrier group. They know the F-35's advantages. They designed it that way. Stealth, sensor fusion, network-centric warfare. These are real strengths. But what worries them is what happens when countries stop asking what is the best jet and start asking what is the smartest jet for us. That shift in thinking changes everything. The Gripen does not try to win the game America is playing. It changes the rules entirely. Instead of chasing absolute dominance, it focuses on survivability, flexibility, and independence. Instead of assuming massive bases, endless spare parts, and thousands of contractors, it assumes something much harsher, that you are alone. That mindset comes straight from Sweden's Cold War history. For decades, Sweden stayed out of NATO. It chose armed neutrality. That wasn't a political slogan. It was a brutal strategic reality. If war came, there would be no American air bases rushing reinforcements, no Allied squadrons flying in to help. Sweden would have to survive on its own, at least long enough to make any invasion unbearably costly. That single assumption shaped everything. Gripen wasn't designed to dominate from pristine air bases protected by layers of missile defense. It was designed to survive a first strike, a surprise attack, a moment when major runways are cratered, command centers are damaged, and chaos rules the skies. That's why Gripen can operate from highways, not special reinforced runways, ordinary roads. About 800 meters is enough. That's why it needs only a small ground crew. 6 people, 10 minutes. Refuel, rearm, inspect, launch again. No massive support infrastructure, no fragile logistics chain. This is not air dominance, this is air survival. And here's where the Pentagon starts to feel uncomfortable. Because survival-based air power doesn't fit neatly into America's model of alliance control. The US vision of air power is built around centralized superiority, expensive platforms, deep integration, tight control of software, upgrades, and data. Allies don't just buy jets, they buy into a system where Washington sets the rules. Gripen doesn't reject cooperation. It's NATO-compatible, it shares data, it flies alongside other Western aircraft. But it refuses total dependence. And that difference may sound subtle, but strategically, it's massive. When a country buys Gripen, it's not just buying an airplane, it's buying the ability to say no. And that's the real story unfolding quietly across defense ministries around the world. Because every Gripen deal signed isn't just a lost sale for American defense giants, it's a crack in the idea that modern air power must flow through Washington. The Pentagon understands this perfectly, and that's why this inferior jet keeps showing up in serious conversations. We'll break down the numbers that make defense planners sweat. Because once you look at costs, readiness, and real-world flying hours, the Gripen story becomes even more unsettling for America's air power model. Before we continue, here's a question to think about. Would you rather have the most advanced jet on Earth, or an aircraft you can actually afford to fly every day? Keep that in mind. The numbers that break the superweapon myth. Now let's talk about the part that makes budget planners shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Not stealth coatings, not radar range, but numbers. Cold, unforgiving numbers. Because modern air power doesn't just live in brochures, it lives in flight hours. According to publicly available US government reports, the cost to fly an F-35 for 1 hour ranges roughly between $35,000 and $47,000. Yes, that number has come down over time, and yes, the Pentagon is working hard to reduce it further, but even the optimistic projections remain extremely high. Now compare that to the Gripen E. Based on data from SAIB and from air forces that actually operate it, the Gripen's cost per flight hour sits around $8,000, sometimes even lower depending on configuration and mission profile. That difference is not cosmetic, it's transformative. With the same budget, a country can fly a Gripen roughly 5 times more than an F-35, 5 times more training, 5 times more patrols, 5 times more real-world experience for pilots. And in air combat, experience matters. A pilot who flies regularly develops instincts no simulator can fully replicate. Situational awareness, decision-making under pressure, muscle memory, these things only come from time in the air, not from perfect technology sitting in a hangar. This leads us to one of the most important but least glamorous metrics in military aviation: mission readiness rate. In simple terms, it's the percentage of aircraft that are actually ready to fly at any given moment. For years, the F-35 struggled in this area. Reports frequently showed readiness hovering between 30 and 50%, meaning that out of 10 jets, only 3 to 5 were fully mission capable on an average day. Maintenance complexity, spare part shortages, and software issues all played a role. Gripen, on the other hand, routinely posts readiness rates between 80 and 90% according to Swedish and Czech Air Force data. That's not because it's magical, it's because it was designed to be simple, robust, and easy to maintain. Here's the uncomfortable question. Defense analysts ask, which force is stronger? 10 jets with incredible technology, half of which can't fly? Or 20 jets that are almost always ready? This is where the superweapon logic begins to crack. The Gripen's engine is a perfect example. It uses a version of the General Electric F414. It's not the most powerful engine in the world. It doesn't push the absolute limits of performance. But it's reliable, and reliability is a force multiplier. When something breaks, it's easier to fix. When parts wear out, replacements are simpler. When small air forces operate far from manufacturer support, simplicity becomes survival. The same philosophy applies to avionics and systems. Gripen is fully compatible with NATO standards. It can talk to F-35s, F-16s, and European fighters, but it is not locked behind a single gatekeeper. Operators can integrate their own weapons, their own software, their own sensors. That freedom is rare. For American aircraft, upgrades often require approval. Software changes pass through U.S. systems. Certain capabilities can be limited or delayed based on political decisions. This isn't a conspiracy. It's how centralized control works. Gripen takes a different path, and that path leads directly to strategic autonomy. Its electronic warfare capabilities are another quiet strength. Gripen doesn't rely solely on stealth to survive. It uses jamming, deception, and electronic attack, creating false targets, blinding radar, confusing air defense networks. In NATO exercises, Gripen is frequently tasked with suppressing enemy air defenses, and it performs extremely well. One Swedish pilot summed it up perfectly when he said, "We don't need absolute stealth, we need enough survivability to finish the mission and come home." That sentence captures everything. Because the Pentagon's fear isn't that Gripen wins dogfights, it's that Gripen proves you don't need perfection to be effective. In the next part, we'll look at what really keeps Washington up at night, how Sweden sells the Gripen, and why those deals create a ripple effect the US can't control. And here's your teaser question. What if buying a fighter jet wasn't just a military decision, but a political declaration? When buying a jet means buying freedom. This is where the story stops being about aircraft and starts being about power. When the United States sells the F-35, it's not just selling hardware, it's selling entry into a tightly controlled ecosystem. Software updates, maintenance chains, training pipelines, data flows, everything passes through American systems. In some sensitive cases, even how the aircraft is used can be influenced. This isn't accidental, it's strategy. The F-35 binds allies closer to Washington. It creates long-term dependence, decades of reliance on American industry, American approvals, American political goodwill. Sweden plays a different game. According to public information from Saab and the Swedish government, Gripen contracts typically include technology transfer, local assembly, and domestic industry participation. This changes everything. Brazil doesn't just fly Gripens. It assembles them, develops subsystems, builds expertise. The Czech Republic doesn't just operate the aircraft, it participates in the maintenance supply chain for an entire region. This creates a domino effect. Each Gripen customer gains industrial capability, skilled labor, technical know-how, strategic confidence. They're no longer just buyers, they're partners. One European defense official summed it up bluntly in an analysis report. With the F-35, we buy capability. With Gripen, we buy freedom. That sentence explains the Pentagon's unease better than any budget chart. Because freedom spreads. Every country that gains more control over its defense decisions becomes less predictable, less easily pressured, more capable of saying no when interests diverge. From Washington's perspective, this is dangerous, not because allies turn hostile, but because they become independent. This puts NATO in a quiet dilemma. Officially, the F-35 is the future, the best technology, the deepest integration, the gold standard, but reality on the ground is messier. Smaller NATO countries don't need global power projection. They don't need to strike halfway across the world. They need deterrence, they need readiness, they need aircraft that can fly tomorrow, not just look impressive in theory. For those nations, Gripen often makes more sense, and recent NATO exercises reveal an uncomfortable pattern. Under equal budget conditions, Gripen units often fly more sorties, maintain higher readiness, and sustain operations longer than F-35 units. This isn't about ideology, it's about endurance. So the question becomes unavoidable. What is real air superiority? Is it absolute stealth with limited availability, or consistent presence with good enough survivability? Is it centralized control, or distributed capability? The Pentagon knows these questions don't have easy answers, and that uncertainty is exactly what Gripen introduces into a system built on certainty. We'll tie everything together and explain why this quiet competition could reshape global power more than any air battle ever could. Before we go there, drop a comment. If you were running a small country's air force, what would you choose, perfection or independence? The idea that threatens an entire system in the end. The Pentagon isn't afraid of Gripen as a fighter jet. It's afraid of what Gripen proves. Gripen proves that you don't need the most advanced technology to defend your skies. You don't need to spend tens of billions of dollars. You don't need to surrender control over your military decisions to a superpower. You just need something that works, consistently, affordably, independently. That idea is explosive, because American air power isn't just about winning battles. It's about shaping the global security architecture, centralizing capability, managing alliances, ensuring interoperability on American terms. Gripen challenges that architecture at its foundation. It offers a future where air power is distributed, not centralized, where medium-sized nations maintain credible deterrence without permanent dependence, where good enough becomes strategically superior to best on paper. International observers increasingly see this as a philosophical clash, not a technical one. Dominance versus resilience, control versus autonomy, perfection versus practicality. And in economics, politics, and strategic psychology, Gripen often wins where the F-35 cannot compete. The most dangerous weapon isn't always the most advanced. Sometimes it's an idea that forces everyone to rethink how power actually works. Gripen doesn't threaten the F-35 in the air. It threatens the system the F-35 was built to maintain. As more nations face the same choice, high cost with dependence or lower cost with freedom, the global balance will shift, not through dogfights, not through missile launches, but through procurement decisions quietly signed in government offices. The final question isn't which aircraft is better. It's which future nations want. Absolute superiority with strings attached, or good enough capability with the right to decide your own path? The Pentagon knows the answer might not go its way, and that's exactly why Sweden's Gripen keeps showing up on its radar. If you want more untold stories about geopolitics, defense, and the ideas shaping global power, hit like, subscribe, and stay curious.